Shoegaze is back, but like most things that return from the dead, it's not quite the same as it was before. Shoegaze in the 2020s is a global phenomenon, and it's incorporating sounds from emo, metal, post-rock, and an ever-increasing range of inspirations. I'm a big fan of some of these new era shoegaze bands, and this video is going to focus on going through 17 of my favorites. Why such a random number? Because I care about you too much to leave out any of my favorites. And not only that, I trust your maturity enough to know you can handle more than 5 or an even 10 new bands. This is Eclecticism, a love letter to music. If you like this style of content, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and turn on notifications if you want to know when I release something new, even if it doesn't fit within your usual algorithmic recommendations. If you watch the channel regularly, thanks for that. And you probably know I recently made a big starter guide to shoegaze that went through 21 bands. None of the bands talked about in that last video are going to be in this one, even though some of them are new era bands. So out of the newer bands, that means I won't be talking about Nothing, Were, Superheaven, Narrowhead, Ringo Death Star, Always, or Alcest. Before we get to the list though, I'm going to address a couple comments that I assume will show up in the comments. Whenever I've done best current bands in an older genre videos, some people have complained that I'm being too loosey-goosey with genres, and some of the bands aren't really the genre I'm supposed to be sticking to. Those bands don't follow the damn rules. Then I'll get a number of people complaining about how all the modern bands are just derivative and doing the same thing the original bands were doing, and there's no point in listening to anything new because it was all better in my youth, kids these days. These two arguments seem to contradict each other, but let's address them both a little bit. You'll probably not think all of the bands that I cover here are strictly shoegaze, just as not all the original shoegaze bands ever agreed they were shoegaze, or wanted to be called that. They didn't sound like one another. Shoegaze is a made-up concept that music journalists use to sell magazines, and now I'm using it to try and get people to click on a video. As for the argument that these bands all sound too derivative, I think this is understandable if you've only superficially explored the era, or only listened to the new bands on some Spotify playlist, and then went about your day without really digging in. I hope this mix of bands will help to change your mind, because I think a lot of them are doing things that are unique from what the original wave of shoegaze bands were doing. Okay, so first up, let's talk about Wednesday. This Asheville, North Carolina band is fronted by Carly Hartzman, and also includes MJ Lenderman on guitar, who you might know for his own solo work. Wednesday started as a solo project for Hartzman, and she described wanting to combine the vocal styles of the Sundays with music that sounds like the Swirlies, but then add country lyrics. By country lyrics, she means these songs are personal narratives, often dark stories of growing up, rural life, poverty, the South, Americana. There aren't many bands that fit within shoegaze where I focus much on the lyrics, but this is one of them. And I like to think of them more as country gaze, given the fact that the lyrics on their most recent work don't have any of the airy or hazy treatment you'd come to expect from shoegaze, instead sounding more worn, a little haggard, highly emotional. Their first proper album as a band, I Was Trying to Describe You to Someone, is the closest to really fitting within shoegaze, and it's definitely worth hearing. But my favorite of their albums so far is their third, Rat Saw God, which feels like the most complete realization so far of their own unique sound. Songs like Bull Believer, an epic multi-story song with a couple distinct acts that builds up to a really cathartic burst of raw emotion in the last couple minutes. Or Quarry, with a melodic and more indie country sound to the verses, which builds up to swelling bursts of guitar noise each time the chorus comes around. So if you're one of those people worried that nobody in shoegaze is doing anything new, please go give Wednesday a listen. Also, they have a new album scheduled for release in September, so now's a good time to start catching up on their career. Next, we have a band from Guangzhou, China. Joe's Moving Day released their first album in 2021, Itinerary, and so far it's their only full-length project. Their sound fits more cleanly into shoegaze than Wednesday's, and specifically the slow dive side of shoegaze, with beautiful and floating female vocals, rich, gorgeous melodies that wash over you. I don't think of them as derivative though, as they have definitely found their own niche in the dreamy shoegaze space. I'm not sure how to define exactly what feels different, whether it has to do with the sorts of feedback they're producing or what. I'm not a musician myself, but it feels like a fresh take or a modernization of a lot of the traditional shoegaze elements. Now, their Instagram page hasn't been updated since 2023, so my hope is that they're hard at work on some more music. I'm also a bit afraid that they might have broken up. It's hard to say. There's not much information on English sites about the band, but they're still widely available on streaming, at least in England. Next, the band Just Mustard from Ireland. They call themselves experimental rock, which also fits, but there's plenty of reverb and tremolo across their body of work, so they'd be at home on a shoegaze mix as well. Their debut album, Wednesday, is the most shoegazy, but maybe noise rock would be a better fit. Either way, it has a beauty mixed with a gloominess that I really enjoy, a blending that fits the shoegaze mood without necessarily following any shoegaze rules very strictly. And I'm just saying, since Just Mustard has an album called Wednesday, it would be really funny if the band Wednesday came out with an album called Just Mustard. So, get on that. My introduction to Just Mustard was their second album, Heart Under. This is full of moody, slightly brooding tracks that have a lot of standout elements for me. From the heavy and dark guitar work, the staggering and tripping along drums, the always beautiful vocals of Katie Bell, and occasionally David Noonan. To me, it captures a sort of cavernous post-punk that still maintains a strong sense of melody. In other words, Just Mustard doesn't fit into any box you try to cram them into, and I highly recommend this newest album especially. It feels like they're getting ready for another album release soon too, which I'm really hyped for based on the first track they've dropped. Next, we have Flying Colours from Melbourne, Australia. They released their first EP in 2014, and they've now followed it with 2 more EPs and 3 albums. Flying Colours follows a trend that I've noticed a lot of the recent era of shoegaze bands go through. Their first few releases, in this case those first 2 EPs, feel very clearly indebted to the original shoegaze bands without as much that distinguishes them from that sound. Then with their most recent albums, it feels like they're moving into their own take or twist on the style. In the case of Flying Colours, there's a lot of crackling guitars and noise, but they deliver songs that feel melodic, full of hooks, and maybe more cheerful overall than a lot of shoegaze you'd hear. They'd be a great pick if you're looking for something cheerful, romantic, maybe a little cinematic. It might also be a good gateway shoegaze band for someone who is more into indie rock or even pop, but is looking to explore. If you're in the mood for some driving, noisy shoegaze, check out their first EPs, which are tremendous fun, even if not that unique. If you want some of the more accessible and upbeat shoegaze out there, check out their recent albums, Fantasy Country and You Never Know. All in all, they've changed over the years, but what's consistent is the quality in what they put out. Next, I think this is one of the less well-known bands I'll cover in this, Adoravel Cliche from Blumo, Brazil. I hope I pronounced that right. Gabrielle Filippi is the vocalist and songwriter, and this 4-piece delivers some nocturnal feeling dream pop / shoegaze. I don't know, maybe they're more on the dream pop side, with the vocals more forward in the mix, and a measured, sometimes restrained use of that wall of sound effect. It's often there as the songs build to their climaxes. Instead of bright fireworks, their songs are glimmering softly like light reflections on water. Maybe that's why they strike me as more nocturnal than most shoegaze, that added level of subtlety. They've released 2 albums so far. Their first album, which translates to What's Inside Me, is the one I've had the most immediate reaction to, so I've spent the most time with it so far. I find the hook stronger, the vibes a little clearer, and it caught my attention right away. Their follow-up, which translates to Dreams That Never Die, didn't make as big of an impression on me so far, but I do feel like that might be a me thing, and I'm gonna give it some more time, since I get the sense it might be a grower. Either way, I recommend giving Adoravel Cliche a try. You also can't go wrong with Virgins from Belfast. Their debut album sounds to me like the arrival of a band who could end up being pretty big. Well, shoegaze big anyway. 2024's Nothing Hurt and Everything Was Beautiful is, to use a phrase I don't think of that often with shoegaze, full of goddamn bangers. They rock, pure and simple. It's dream poppy, but too loud to feel like pure dream pop to me. This is a glittering whirlwind of high-tempo driving drums, tremolo guitars, and ethereal vocals riding over all of it with really strong melodies throughout. I can rarely make out any lyrics, but I still feel like many of these songs are earworms, with strong and memorable melodies and riffs. With some strong early singles, and then an album that more than delivers on the promise of them, I can't wait to see what's next for this band. Now seems like as good a time as any to say thank you to Patreon subscriber Alice Devilman. Patreon subscribers are part of an elite, cool club who have access to additional playlists, behind-the-scenes content, have early access to videos, and have access to the Eclectic Pod, a music podcast where I go into bigger topics with my brother and occasional guest hosts. The podcast has had an admittedly slow start because the best laid plans of mice and men, etc., but the second episode is coming out soon, and the third is scheduled and we'll have a guest, and that guest happens to be a musician who's been mentioned on the channel. So subscribe if you want bonus content now and a more favorable afterlife as well. If you watched my Best of 2024 video, you probably knew this next band was coming. Julie is a trio from Los Angeles who started off with some very noisy shoegaze EPs. The first was Variable Bloom, a handmade EP they released in 2020. And then they followed it up with the excellent 2021 EP Pushing Daisies. This is another where they reference shoegaze, while also sounding like they've studied Sonic Youth and noise rock bands. The Pushing Daisies EP is infectious and a lot of fun. Their first full-length album, My Anti-Aircraft Friend, came out in 2024. This moved more in the direction of slacker rock, so considering them a shoegaze band on the whole might be stretching it. Some fans were let down by how this album moved away from sounding specifically shoegaze. I went into it without any particular expectations, and I liked it a lot. I do think we're likely to see them continue to include shoegaze as a part of their sound, and I'm excited to see what they do next, since they clearly are not operating within any boundaries. Then there's Greet Death from Flint, Michigan. Now this strikes me as a band that shoegaze purists are probably going to just call rock, given the fact that there's a big range in how much shoegazy effects are applied in their music. Sometimes they go nuts with guitar pedals. Other times they aren't that prominent. They have songs that lean into more folk or just indie rock, with the lead vocalist often reminding me of Tom York or maybe Tim Smith from Harp and Midlake. Greet Death brings more of a despondent vocal sound that has led to some people calling them emo gaze, which I don't quite agree with in how I think of the term emo. Nothing really reminds me of emo here, either the original wave or Hot Topic emo. I think people just hear the emotions behind the music and throw emo in front of it. I want to cover them because the songs are very pretty, in particular on their newest album, this year's Die in Love. There are some great earworms on here, like Country Girl and the title track, putting this one in my top 10 for 2025 so far. If you're a committed shoegaze diehard, give them a try, but if you enjoy indie rock in a more broad sense, there's a good chance you'll like them as well. Okay, before we go any further, if you're curious and want to hear some of my favorite tracks from these artists, there is a playlist that goes with this video, and I make one for every eclecticism video, so if you want to see what I think are the highlights from all of these albums, have a listen to that when you get done with the video. Okay, so if you're getting tired of hearing about borderline shoegaze bands, here's a good meat and potatoes straight-up shoegaze band for your listening pleasure. Terraplana. They formed in 2019 in Brazil, and they've become one of the best known of Brazil's shoegaze bands. I've loved both of their albums so far, with Natural from 2025 slightly edging out Olhar pra Trás as my favorite from them. It feels a bit more confident and distinct, definitely shoegaze, but weaving in inspirations from other not that distant genres like post-rock. The bands they cite as influences are really a chef's kiss of great music, including Unwound, Bark Psychosis, Slint, Steve Reich, and Milton Nascimento. Nascimento? Milton Nascimento? I'm gonna admit the only one of these I picked up on in their music is maybe Unwound, just from some of that post-rock elements, but it's good to know they have excellent taste either way. Terraplana is one of my personal favorites from this video. A lot of these bands are more obviously original, but Terraplana does what they do so well that I'm usually more likely to put them on than most of the bands on this list if I really just want to hear good old shoegaze the way Grandma used to make. Or if I want to listen to some mellow and smooth modern rock with consistently interesting melodies and musicianship. So if you're my friend who asks me for some straight up modern shoegaze that's worth listening to, Terraplana is going to be one of the first bands I tell you about. Then we have DIIV. This Brooklyn band has morphed through a variety of sounds over their excellent career so far. Their sprawling second album, Is the Is Are, explores dream pop and shoegaze some of the time, but captures a wide range of sounds across its length. For example, the gorgeous Under the Sun feels like it could have been a late 80s or early 90s hit that feels driving and hopeful, despite a certain melancholy that carries through the vocals. This is an incredibly strong album, even if it could have benefited from shortening the length a bit. They weren't just inspired by music of the CD era, but also apparently by the length of CDs. I would say the strength of DIIV is mostly in writing enjoyable songs that dive into various forms of indie rock, and each of their albums shows them exploring new territory in their sound. There's not a lot of ground here that nobody's explored before, yet they show a lot of range and ongoing growth in what they're willing to pull from and experiment with. The first two albums feel more dreamy and melancholy but hopeful, And then their third, Deceiver, is much darker and harsher, with more of the guitar textures of noisy shoegaze. However, it never feels like paint-by-numbers shoegaze, as the band always seems ready to pull in whatever is going to benefit the song, more than try to capture a certain established sound. Then their fourth album, Frog in Boiling Water, maintains the gloom of their third, while maybe showing more nuance in their songwriting. It's more mid-tempo and feels quite brooding. I don't think it's their most immediate work, which might still be Is the Is Are, but if you give the album a little time to grow on you, it's quite good. Given their range, it's hard for me to pick a favorite album, since the one that sounds most appealing usually depends on my mood. But lately I've been listening to Frog in Boiling Water the most. They're definitely a band worth exploring, both diverse and diverting. Okay, I couldn't make a video on modern shoegaze and not talk about the Japanese scene. Shoegaze is definitely a global phenomenon now, but there's a lot going on in Japan, and I've only scratched the surface in exploring it myself. I can tell that Japanese shoegaze could be its own topic at some point whenever I want to really dive into that rabbit hole. You can go all the way back to Coaltar of the Deepers, who were making Japanese shoegaze all the way back in the 90s. And there have been other bands exploring shoegaze along the way, with Massive the Fermenting Dregs being another huge one. And yes, they did more than just shoegaze, but it was part of their sound. Since we're talking about modern shoegaze, I want to focus on Moon in June. Moon in June is making gorgeous, jangly shoegaze that finds a sweet spot between feeling cheerful while still having traces of melancholy. The melodies are gorgeous and soaring. They've released 2 EPs, Umanari and Evergreen, which are both quite good. Evergreen would be a pretty good starting point for exploring them if you want a shorter entry point. If you want something full length, their debut album is so far my favorite thing they've put out. Romance and Soft Blue City is just beautiful, with crunchy feedback that rides over lovely melodies that often have touches of jangle pop, maybe even a touch of power pop every now and then. Their second album came out in April, Colorless You. I've started exploring this and I like it as well. As they're still a fairly new band, I'm very excited to see where they go from here. So a couple other bands from the scene that I've been into are Beachside Talks, who occasionally share a guitarist with Moon in June. Their first album came out this year, Hokorobi. This has very clean production for an album that still has a shoegaze feel to it, and it's also the first time I've heard an ostensibly shoegaze band experiment with auto-tune in a way that's noticeable as you listen to it. To me, that's a cool idea. I like that they're trying it out, although I can imagine a lot of purists out there are rolling their eyes right now. Then there's Blurred City Lights, whose debut album came out in 2024. They then released 2 EPs this year, Utopia and Dystopia. With all of these bands, they managed to embrace the noisiness of shoegaze while also capturing a more poppy and romantic side of the sound. That isn't to say the melancholy is missing though. The quote on the cover of Moon in June's It's Not Over Yet single captures it beautifully. The tastiest pieces of pure pop pleasure, but sugar can be bittersweet and laced with longing. Should I cover Japanese shoegaze or modern Japanese indie rock on its own? Let me know what you think in the comments. But now, from the opposite side of the globe, let's go to where I actually grew up. Cloakroom is a band from Indiana. My condolences. I'm just kidding. Or am I? Cloakroom formed in 2012 in Northwest Indiana. They exemplify my argument about modern shoegaze in the sense that they're exploring guitar noise in a boundaryless sense that won't sound like shoegaze all of the time. But I think it fits with the ethos of the early bands. It's melancholy, but it's not following a blueprint. It's sometimes doomy, sometimes psychedelic, sometimes a little slowcore incorporated, maybe even just a bit of post-rock. I started exploring Cloakroom with their second album, Timewell. This album has a melancholy beauty to it, with unconventional song structures that include noise, but are still quite melodic. It's also what I'd call a bit of a grower. There's a lot to process. I've seen some reviews say the album sounds a bit samey, which I don't agree with at all, but I feel like that could be a quick take if you only hear it once. I feel like there's a nocturnal or subterranean feel to it that carries through the whole album. But I love the way they maintain this mood while shifting between loud and fuzzy passages and softer, dreamier moments. I find the whole album beautiful, and it gets better with more listens. Their third album, Dissolution Wave, starts off with one of their most shoegazy tracks yet, the excellent Lost Meaning. Throughout, it does feel a bit more shoegaze, but if you go in expecting just that, again, you'll be let down. Their newest album, 2025's Last Leg of the Human Table, has really impressed me by how much their sound has shifted. I'd say this one sounds the least shoegaze overall, and emphasizes the melodies, and maybe even a little jangle on occasion. The band has referred to themselves as stoner emo, which I can kind of see, but it certainly wouldn't be the first description I'd come up with. I really recommend trying out any of their last 3 albums, depending on which sounds the most intriguing to you. I'll explore different sounds, and I'll reward repeated listens. And another band that I think is exploding the boundaries of what shoegaze can be is Holy Fawn. This Phoenix, Arizona band formed from the ashes of a ghost folk project called Owl and Penny. I don't know what ghost folk is, but I really want to know now. I've seen them referred to as doomgaze, a mix of doom metal and shoegaze, but I think this is an oversimplification of what they do. Their debut album, Death Spells, goddamn, it's good. This is gonna sound very pretentious, but with the best music, it makes me feel some sense of awe or transcendence, a kind of almost spiritual connection that's brought out by the music. This album gives me that feeling. It feels like it channels the beauty of nature in its sound, which can range from gorgeous mid-tempo passages to ponderous epic doom passages, and even a couple moments that feel like it was inspired by black metal. So if you're one of those people who insists there's nothing new happening in rock right now, this is a band I'd suggest you check out. You may or may not actually like what they're doing, but I don't think you can point me to another band that sounds like them. I've not been as blown away by their follow-up, Dimensional Bleed. This is likely because it doesn't feel like it's breaking new ground in the same way that their first one did, but it's continuing to explore what they've already established. I wouldn't be surprised if this is just because I haven't yet given it enough time, and I will really like it after a couple more listens. And even talking about it has gotten me thinking I need to go back and hear this one some more. Okay, so while we're talking about bands on the outer edges of what would be considered shoegaze, how about some gothic slowgaze, maybe? Vyva Melinkolya, the stage name of Pittsburgh's Angel Diaz, who has 2 albums out so far under this project. The newest of them, 2023's Unbecoming, emphasizes her gorgeous voice and the languorous pace of these sad and emotionally intense songs. Despite the technical connection to shoegaze, her work reminds me more of artists like Chelsea Wolfe, who, possibly because of the haunted feeling of the music and Wolfe's explorations of feedback on some of her albums, makes them seem superficially similar at least. But Diaz mentions her 2 favorite bands are Low and Grouper, and her music does feel like it's blending certain elements of both of them in a way that's really appealing and interesting. I'd recommend this if you're a fan of slowcore, shoegaze, or just gorgeous, shimmering music. Okay, 2 more. Now we're off to South Korea for an artist who I will not be showing you any photos of because they've made an effort to remain anonymous. Parannoul has referred to himself as just a student writing music in his bedroom, but it's some fairly remarkable music that has caught on quite a bit through internet word of mouth. I found out about him a little bit late with his 3rd album, After the Magic. This was one of my big highlights of 2023, and I quickly backtracked to his 2nd album, the gorgeous To See the Next Part of the Dream. This is seen by many as his highest point yet. Even for shoegaze, there's a bit of maximalism going on here, and more of a focus on electronics since he is a bedroom music producer. Unlike a lot of what is often called electronic shoegaze though, this feels like it fits the vibe and sonic characteristics of shoegaze a little bit better, for me anyway. I mentioned his 4th album in the Best of 2024 video, so ever since I've discovered his work, he's been making my best of the year list. And when I started working on this video, he was literally the first person I knew I'd be talking about. If you want a big, bombastic, nostalgic take on electronic shoegaze, I really recommend checking out Parannoul. And finally, the final band, the modern masters of slacker noise, Feeble Little Horse. Also from Pittsburgh, this 4-piece formed in 2021 and fall on the more noise pop end of the shoegaze spectrum than the psychedelic one. Their combination of pop accessibility with their embrace of distorted noise is infectious, and it's incredibly fun. The dry humor of the lyrics and the off-key vocal delivery add to the DIY feel of the music, making for a band that strikes that balance of feeling accessible yet unique. Both of their albums have been really fun so far, but 2023's Girl with Fish has more songs that get stuck in my head, like the hilarious Steamroller, the instantly earwormy Freak, or the adorable Pocket. It's a very short album at only 26 minutes, but those 26 minutes are packed with sugary hooks and delicious noise. And again, if all of this sounds very intriguing and you want to go from hearing it described to actually hearing it, You can head straight to the playlist after this and listen to my favorite tracks from all of these artists on the Today's Best Shoegaze playlist. So there you have it, 17 modern shoegaze or shoegaze adjacent bands that I really like and I think you might like too. This is obviously not comprehensive. I'm not an AI and I don't use AI in anything I do. I've not heard everything. So this list is just based on what has crossed my ears over the last few years. Nonetheless, I hope some of them are new to you, and even better, I hope you find one or two that really connect with the kind of music you like, and serve as a reminder that shoegaze is back and it's in full swing. Thanks for watching Eclecticism, and I'll see you next time.